This episode contains authentic audio from the 1978 Jonestown Massacre in Guyana and mentions suicide, which may be triggering for some.
The town may be kind of small, but these folks have big smiles and big hearts, and they know what it is to have simple fun down our way, where old-fashioned singing and homey gatherings make living mighty pleasant.
You know, the beauty of New York is that everyone brings their A game. Nobody's phoning it in when they're playing New York, regardless of the size of the venue. The energy that's in the room, regardless of the size of the room.
Yeah, and it's mainly from the crowd, from the audience, and, well, from the city as well, the city itself.
Sure.
It's rolling.
Welcome to Abandoned Albums, the documentary podcast where we take a closer look at some albums that may have been forgotten about over time, and some albums you might not even be aware of. I'm your host, Keith R. Higgins. Rob Janicki is on assignment in the New York City borough of Staten Island. The Vapors made their way onto the music scene with the hit song Turning Japanese off their debut album Nuclear Days, or rather, New Clear Days. Because the Vapors' debut album was released at the height of the Cold War, it won't come as a shock to learn that the title, Nuclear Days, is close to Nuclear Days.
But what if there is a bombing that comes without warning? What is your job then? Find cover immediately. Don't look at the flash. Stretch out. In about 1 minute, the immediate danger is past. Then head for safer cover.
The album's hit song Turning Japanese is a seminal piece of early 80s rock and roll or new wave music. It also remains a staple on every 80s-themed playlist and at every 80s-themed party around the world. On this episode of Abandoned Albums, I talk with Steve Smith of The Vapors about the band's 1981 album, Magnets. Riding the coattails of their wildly successful debut album, Magnets was largely considered a commercial disappointment. However, 41 years later, I don't think anyone could refer to Magnets as an artistic disappointment. So here's my conversation with Steve Smith of The Vapors. We'll start at the very beginning. How did the Vapors sort of take shape? How did you guys come together?
Well, there was Dave started the Vapors, and I think back in 78, I think 1978, and it was him and a different guitar player and a different drummer and a different bass player, and it was a very different band, but still some of the same songs that were on the first album. One by one, the people in the band Dave either dispensed with or left. And then I think Ed was the first to join. He joined in February, I think. And then I joined next in March. And Howard, as soon as I'd done my audition for the band, the drummer quit the band. And actually, I did take him to task about that. I saw him about 4 years ago. Someone said, "Oh, your original drummer's here. Do you want to say hello?" And I said, "Yeah." "Why did you quit after my audition?" He said, "Well, I was mates with the bass player, and the bass player had gone. I just thought it was right for me to go." So then I joined, and then obviously then straight away we had to get a new drummer, and then that's when we got Howard. And so by, I'd say, April 79, the sort of classic lineup had taken shape. We did our first gig at a little college. I think our second or third gig was at a tiny pub in Surrey on a Sunday night, and Bruce Foxton from the Jam was in this tiny little pub and appeared to be enjoying what he was seeing. And at the end, he said, "Would you guys like to support the Jam on a couple of gigs?" And the Jam actually at the time were my favourite band. They still are one of my favourite bands. This was kind of unbelievable.
Right.
So we said, yeah, for sure. So we did these two gigs, which went really, really well. And we were all quite young at the time. I think Ed and Howard were 18.
Whoa.
I think I was 21 and Dave was a bit older. Dave was like 25 or so, but Ed and Howard were really young. And so we did these two gigs, and John Weller liked what he saw, which was the Jam's manager and also Paul's father.
Right.
He came to a gig we were playing in our hometown in the summer of 79 and said, "Well, how do you feel about me and Bruce managing you guys?" Which is, that's a bit of a rhetorical question, a question that doesn't need an answer, isn't it? So we said, yeah, for sure. And the next thing we knew, we were getting signed to United Artists, and they were chucking us in the studio to do our first album, Nuclear Days.
Wow.
Which was the end of 79. And then obviously 1980 Turning Japanese came out in the UK in February and was a hit.
Yeah.
And then we spent quite a lot of 1980 kind of following it around the world. It was getting released later in Australia and later still in America. I think it was on import in America for a while before it actually got a release. And so we were kind of just following this record around the world, which made it a bit... it was difficult to get the second album together, really, because we were working so much live.
Right.
Dave was finding it difficult to find time to record, and just, getting the songs together is just, we were so hectic doing TV shows and gigs and all sorts of things.
That's got to be exciting for a young group like yourselves, though.
It's a dream come true. It's what you dream, isn't it? When you join a band, you just have these like really crazy, wild dreams, and just occasionally you find out that they actually sometimes come true.
So as the dust was settling from the success of both Turning Japanese and then the album Nuclear Days, where did you guys decide to go to record this follow-up record, Magnets?
Well, we started in because we were so busy touring, and we had some American dates that we had to do. We did the backing tracks at a studio called Farmyard in Oxfordshire, I think it is, where we did the bass and the drums. Mm-hmm. And then we went off and did some shows in America. And we had a 3-week gap in the show schedule where we were going to stay in LA, and we mixed it and did overdubs and vocals in a place called MCA Whitney, quite a well-known studio. I mean, Barry White was in Studio One, so it was obviously it's a proper studio, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was a great studio. So yeah, we did like half of it we did in the UK, and the other half we did in Los Angeles. That's
interesting. Does that break up the what's the word? I guess.
But break up the flow of it.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great word. The flow of it. Did it disrupt it?
Well, it kind of did, because there must have been about at least a 2.5 month gap between starting it and then continuing on with it, and it was kind of a bit difficult to get back into it. But it was different for me because I'd done pretty much all of my stuff in the UK. I'd done all the bass parts, and I was just doing bits of vocals and bits of keyboards. But for Dave, he was in there quite a lot of the time doing vocals.
Sure.
It'd be a different experience for him.
Is there a tendency in that gap? Was there a tendency for him to revisit some of the lyrics, or were the lyrics just locked in?
Well, when we started the album, we really didn't. Some of the songs weren't that finished. Some of them, particularly like Magnets, the title track, a lot of that was assembled in the studio, and we really didn't have that many songs. When we did Nuclear Days and when we did our last album together, I think we had like a choice of songs. We had 20 songs, and we only needed 11 or 12 or something. But when we did Magnets, we only had like 11 or 12 songs. So it was a lot different experience. And some of them weren't very finished when we started recording them, but they got put together in the studio a bit. And Magnets is one of my favourite tracks that we ever did, because it's so powerful.
they can be seen, then pour contempt through eyes that seem like magnets, small and hard magnets. They roll way down through the arches. The wet streets shine confetti line. The sun burns everything.
When I listen to the demo, it's nothing like that. It doesn't sound anything like that.
The demo of the song Magnets?
Yeah, it's quite a lot different.
What do you attribute the difference to? Is that where a producer comes in and says, what if we do this? Yeah?
That's what a good producer does. You know, it doesn't just record the song. He contributes to the genesis of it.
So who was it who produced Magnets?
It was Dave Tickle.
He helped you shape that title track?
He basically put that song together and said, okay. I mean, the big thing was the acoustic guitars and like not everyone playing at the same time at the beginning, you know, starting it off very atmospheric and finishing it very atmospheric.
I was watching, there was a documentary on Rick Rubin, and he talks about his idea of producing as vibing.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, well, it's not, I mean, I'm not saying you need to control the board, but if it were me, I'd want somebody a little bit more active than just vibing.
Yeah, but it's kind of creating a good atmosphere for everyone and just letting everyone think that you're in control and you know what you're doing, I think, if you're a producer, and just making everyone feel relaxed and confident and yeah, vibing, you know, it's quite a good word for it, really. You know, because the engineer is the guy that's going to be doing all the technical stuff on the board. Bruce, producer, is there to kind of adjudicate on stuff and say, yeah, that's the best take, and you know. But Dave Tickle was very good at. He had ideas. He was good.
When you're in the studio as a band and when you're recording the record, are the Vapors the type of band that feed off that creative tension?
Yeah, I think maybe back in those days, yeah, I think that's true. Yeah. Yeah. I think we did kind of get off on that creative tension, and yeah, I think that's right.
I want to ask about Martin Hanford. Now, for those of you who don't know, that's the guy who created Where's Waldo. He also happened to do the album cover for the Vapors' Magnets. Obviously, you can see some stylistic similarities between Where's Waldo and Magnets and the cover of Magnets. Now, on the surface, the cover of the record is an eyeball. But if you look at it a little bit deeper, it's a lot more than just an eyeball. I'm not going to spoil what the scene is, but you know, kind of dark.
Yeah.
Steve, how did all of that? How did you guys hook up with that guy?
Dave had the idea that he wanted an idea, and I think it was the record company that put Martin Hanford up for it. I think they showed us some of his work, which was very much big crowds of people making other pictures, and thought, yeah, this is kind of quite interesting. Let's try it. And then he came back with the cover, and we were like, wow, yeah, that's brilliant. It's telling its own little story in there, isn't it?
Sure is.
You can look at it on different levels. You can look at it on a purely kind of quick look at it, or you can delve into it a bit deeper. And it's a bit like the record. You can either just listen to it a bit on the surface, or you can delve into it more.
I always said she was no better than you'd think. Wild parties at all hours, firing guns around, drinking. Oh, I dare say the woman wasn't happy. But then who is? Now I ask you, who is?
Who were some of your influences, both as a band, as the Vapors, and yours personally?
I think we were all very much influenced by David Bowie. Particularly Dave. Bowie is definitely Dave's favourite, but you know, for me as well, it's a big influence on me growing up.
Right.
Also, all of us are really into the Beatles and the Stones, classic old stuff. In fact, Dave's first gig, when you play the game of like, what was the first gig you ever went to with Dave, he comes back with the Beatles.
You can't top that.
Yeah, that's what I said to him. I said, well, I'm not even going to bother. Yeah. So we were all kind of into that classic stuff, but also we were really into what was going on in terms of the Clash and the Sex Pistols and the Jam and what was shaking up music at the time, the Ramones. I'd say that was pretty much that Dave very much influenced also by kind of more arty things like Captain Beefheart and Devo.
Oh, okay.
I was more a bit of a traditionalist, I suppose.
As I've listened to the record and listened to the songs and dug through some of the lyrics, I'm struggling trying to find the metaphor relevance of magnets as it relates to the songs. Is there one, or am I just overthinking that? It's quite possible.
It's to do with the title track. The title track of the album, where it's Kennedy's children are all magnets, and it's about people are like drawn like magnets to celebrity and fame.
That hasn't changed at all.
No.
And that's another thing about the record. It seems so forward thinking for a record that came out 42 years ago.
Yeah.
Not only does it still sound relevant, which is there's no there's no stamp as far as the sound goes, but lyrically, it's still really powerful and relevant, and it's really dark, which I personally like.
Dave was getting a bit more introverted in his lyrical writing and sort of exploring different avenues. And there's songs about Jimmie Jones, sort of Kennedy's. But also personal songs like Can't Talk Anymore.
Let's talk about Jimmie Jones for a second. About a month ago, I was on a website searching for some archival audio footage that I could intercut into episodes, as I am wont to do. And I stumbled across one of Jim Jones, must have been one of his final diatribes, talking to his followers as they're drinking the Kool-Aid. And I don't mean that metaphorically. And I thought to myself, wow, this will come in handy sometime. I'll be able to use this at some point. So I downloaded it. Little did I know I'd get to use it so quickly.
Yeah.
My opinion is that we be kind to children and be kind to seniors and take the portion like they used to take in ancient Greece and step over quietly, because we are not committing suicide. It's a revolutionary act. We can't go back. They won't leave us alone. They're now going back to tell more lies, which means more congressmen, and there's no way we can survive.
What I like most about Jimmie Jones is that juxtaposition or that conflict that's taking place. On one hand, it's a lyrically dark song, but on the other hand, musically, it's almost got a poppy sound to it.
It's like a kind of bouncy sing-along pop tune, but with really kind of a dark subject matter.
Very dark, yeah. And naively, I thought, before I even heard it and dug around and saw the lyrics, I thought it might be a companion piece to the Clash's Janie Jones. It's not. It's definitely not that. We were talking with a writer the other day about the Clash and how anger fueled a lot of their work. There's a lot of anger, I find, in a lot of these lyrics, but the music doesn't necessarily sync up with that. How did that work creatively for you guys? Did Dave come everything fully formed, Or how did that sort of work creatively? How did you get these dark lyrics to come out? And like Jimmie Jones is a perfect example, right? It's dark, but it's, I don't want to say poppy because I don't think it's poppy. It's just, it's not, it doesn't sound like a sludge, you know, like a Black Sabbath tune. Yeah.
That song, actually, I can remember exactly how that song came about. It's Ed was just bored in a rehearsal and played the guitar riff that you hear at the beginning. And I thought, oh, that sounds really interesting, and started playing the bass bit. I thought, okay, the drummer joined in, and we kind of had this piece of music. And I think we were messing around while Dave had gone to the shops or something. I think we were just messing around or gone to get a cup of tea. And he came back and he went, oh, that's really interesting. I'm just going to record that. So he recorded it on an old school cassette. And the next day, I think it was, he came in and he said, I've got these lyrics for that song. And there it was, Jimmie Jones. And it was, wow, this is quite powerful stuff. But right, I think Dave is a fantastic lyricist. But, you know, as good as anybody, I think.
No quarrel from me. And what's also interesting about the record is it addresses so many things that are still sadly so relevant. You know, police brutality, the assassinations, mental health. You know, I think at the time in the UK, my history is shit awful. But, I mean, you guys were going through a huge upheaval at the time with Thatcherism and so on and so forth. Great. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of rioting going on, you know.
And did that influence you guys?
Yeah. We were all very much anti-conservative, anti-Thatcher, very much so. Yeah, we did a Rock Against Racism benefit in, I think, 1979, one of our very first gigs in London. And literally, we left after we'd played, but after a bit later on, literally people were barricading themselves in the venue because skinheads were attacking it with like axe handles and trying to break in and get people. There was things like that going on as well. There's quite a lot of right-wing violence.
Let's talk a little bit about, I mean, we often talk about on this podcast, record labels often get the brunt of it because oftentimes they're not very good at promoting their artists for whatever reason. I mean, it could be a myriad of different reasons. What do you think happened with the record? Because it got very good reviews, you know, but it just didn't really seem to follow the same success. Was it mismarketed? Was it poor promotion?
Well, really, the big issue we had is we signed to a little record label called United Artists, which was actually quite a small label. It was on one floor of a building in London, and there were about, I don't know, maybe only sort of 17 or 18 employees in the whole of United Artists. And we signed to them because they were a small label. They all liked the band. They're very keen to do it. And so we thought, great, we found also they had the Buzzcocks, the Stranglers, Dr. Feelgood, you know, bands that we kind of liked. And they also had a reputation for sticking with their bands and not ditching them if the first album didn't sell. So we thought, great, we're signed to United Artists because we had Polydor in the frame as well. However, when Turning Japanese was a hit, I mean, literally 3 weeks later, we found out that EMI, the big conglomerate from Manchester Square in London, had bought United Artists. They'd bought United Artists label. They'd sacked all the staff and most of the bands. However, they decided to keep hold of us, the Stranglers, Dr. Feelgood, I think, and the Buzzcocks. They decided to just, I think they were the only 4 bands they kept from the whole roster. And we literally walked into EMI and they were like, "Who are you? You know, what are you doing here?" And we went, "Well, we're supposed to have a new record coming out." And our A&R guy didn't even know that we had, which was the follow-up record, News at 10. He didn't even know that it was coming out. And we'd gone from being as important as anybody else, as any of the other bands, to just being totally unimportant. They had like Duran Duran to look after and much, much bigger acts than us. And that just really, it was the beginning of the end of the band. You know, basically a month after turning Japanese it was the beginning of the end, because they did some promotion. I think getting radio play in the UK was very difficult. Jimmie Jones, it did okay, but it wasn't a massive hit like Turning Japanese was. So they did a bit of promotion, but they could have done more. My recollection is that I don't think we got. I think a lot. I actually looked at reviews of the album, and the ones that I can find now are really amazingly positive. But I don't remember back in the day the reviews being that good, to be honest. All of the reviews that I was reading recently are all from the last sort of 5 years or so, and they're all invariably positive and saying, "Oh, this is quite a few of them were saying this is a much better album than Nuclear Days," but nobody said that back in the day. Nobody went, "Magnets is better than Nuclear Days," but.
Yeah, that's what makes what we do here kind of cool, because we can highlight some of these records like yours and say to folks, "Hey, you got it wrong," or you're missing something here.
Like you say, it's still relevant, a lot of that album, and it still sounds. I like the production that David Tickle did.
When we talk with other folks on our podcast, we talk a lot about labels like power pop, new wave, punk, etc. Were you guys concerned at all about being classified as any specific label? And do you think that had any sort of bearing on where you landed, both at the beginning and then as you went out into Magnets?
Yeah, it was kind of a bit weird, because I think we always thought of ourselves a bit as a sort of kind of punk band, really. That's the way we kind of thought of ourselves. But I mean, a couple of us dressed a bit moddy. We were heavily involved with the jams. We kind of got a bit of a label of being a mod band, but not really a mod band. A punk band, but not really a punk band. And I mean, even to this day, we do. Sometimes we do mod festivals. Our next gig is a mod festival, but we also do punk festivals as well. We're doing the Rebellion Punk Festival in the summer. So it kind of worked for us in a way, because people would try and put labels on it, but then go, "Yeah, they're not really that though, are they?" It kind of was a bit more, which is kind of like what the Vapors meant, to be something kind of a bit ethereal and
sure,
and not too able to pin it down.
When you had the success of Nuclear Days, and then you turn in Magnets, and it comes out, and what was your feeling like as a band at that point? Was because you're riding high off a worldwide huge record?
Yeah.
And then this comes out, and I think you say it led to the breakup of the band, or it led to...
Well, indirectly, because it wasn't big, it wasn't a major success. And I think that affected the record company's confidence in us as a band. And I think we were going to go in to do a new single that wasn't off Magnets' album, something new. And we were the day before we were going into the studio, the A&R man turned up, listened and said, and then he went, "Great, lads," went home and pulled the studio time.
What?
Yeah, so Dave said, "I can't work with people who won't even talk to me to my face and tell me what they're doing. I'm quitting. I'm off." And I don't blame him for that.
No.
I could see exactly what he meant. They kind of lost confidence in us, and that kind of made us lose confidence in ourselves a little bit, I think.
How could it not?
Yeah.
And how cowardly to, say, "Great, lads," and then go home and pull the plug on it.
Yeah, it was very, very cowardly. But, I was proud. I'm proud of the 2 albums we did then, and the more recent one. So at the end of the day, I had a fantastic experience doing it. We made some great music, and
You absolutely did it. And that's the joy of, I think that's one of the perks of the internet and things like this, is that people can rediscover good music. I mean,
yeah,
shudder to think what might have happened had the internet and streaming services, whatever your feelings are on streaming, it does open up a world of new music for artists.
yeah. I mean, I think that the main problem with streaming would be great if the money was shared out better.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say about it. Niall Rodgers came to the Houses of Parliament because they're trying to fix streaming in this country so it works more. And Niall Rodgers went to the Houses of Parliament and he said, look, this should be a brilliant relationship between the artist and Spotify. It should be fantastic. The artist makes the music, Spotify delivers the music out there to everyone in the whole world. That's great to get that reach. He said, but it financially is so one-sided that you just feel kind of violated.
But let me ask you this, Steve, just to as a bit of a counterbalance, was it ever transparent, even in the old days?
Well, good point, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we got ripped off in the old days. We get ripped off now.
I'm not condoning it, but yeah, you know, the entire industry was built off the creativity and the souls of people, you know?
Yeah, and then businessmen coming in and taking all the money.
You're touring now. Are you?
Yeah.
What's the lineup now? Is it?
It's myself and Dave from the original band, and Dave's son Daniel plays guitar, and we've got a drummer called Michael Bowles who's been with us since we reformed in 2016. And yeah, we're gigging and we're writing, and we're really enjoying it the second time round. Really enjoying it. For me. Although you can't really replace the sort of whiz-bang craziness of the first time round, I'm a lot more relaxed about it now.
Yeah.
And we all are.
And there are the birds telling me it's the end of the episode. Steve, listen, thanks so much for dropping by.
Thank you for having me.
And Magnets is a great record, truly. So thank you for sharing that with all of us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Take it easy, yeah?
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Many thanks to Steve Smith and the rest of the Vapors. The songs you heard during this podcast were all taken from the Vapors album Magnets, and they were Magnets, Jimmie Jones, and We Can't Talk Anymore. All three albums by the Vapors, Nuclear Days, Magnets, and Together, are available to stream wherever you stream your favorite music. The Vapors are on tour this summer. Abandoned Albums was recorded on location at... Rufus, do you have to? Abandoned Albums was recorded on location at Thunder Love Studios.
Produced and written by Keith R. Higgins.
Engineered and mixed by Steve Beasley. Edited by A.J. Royce.
Original music by Mike Pellegrino. If you like what you've heard, be sure to subscribe and follow us on social media. At Twitter, we are at Abandoned Albums, and on Instagram, we are at Abandoned_albums.
As always, thanks to Rob Janicki, S.W. Loudon, Nathan Sage, Steve Beasley, Mike Pellegrino, Therina Bella, and of course, our executive producer, Rufus Thunderlove.
And now, until we meet again next time, I remain as always obediently yours.
Abandoned Albums is a production of Station Road, LLC.